Hello, this is Roy Rosso, and this is the Module 6 video synopsis for Adult Learning Theory. The article that I've chosen is Spaced Repetition Promotes Efficient and Effective Learning, Policy Implications for Instruction. The premise for instituting change in policy is that students in the United States have typically been found less proficient in math, science, and reading when compared to their counterparts in other countries. The proposal by many would be to increase time for education, and that would mean longer school days or longer school years. The author of the article feels that changing how students learn may be more beneficial rather than lengthening the school day or the school year. Part of the change can be implementation of spaced repetition. Spaced repetition, simply put, is practice makes perfect. However, with spaced repetition, it's not so much the practice that is the main concept. It is the interval or the spacing of that practice. The article is broken down into several different topics. The first being the benefits of spaced repetition on memory retention. It then talks about how testing and spacing combined make up something called spaced retrieval practice. Spacing lag, which is the interval between the spaced repetition. The next concept is that it improves the generalization and transfer of learning. And spacing with interleaving is a concept that is introduced into a classroom setting for a study that's very interesting. First topic to be discussed is the benefits that spaced repetition has on memory. The author points to 254 studies that indicate spaced repetition is far superior than that of massed practice, which is essentially cramming for a test. He gives an example from 1925 where two groups were tasked with learning the Athenian Oath. One group was slated as a massed practice group and the other a spaced repetition group. In the end, the spaced repetition group retained the information of the Athenian Oath much better than the massed practice group. There are several theories that try to explain how spaced repetition improves the memory. And one concept is that the constant and repeated retrieval of the knowledge is actually what enhances the memory. The second being that the context surrounding each repetition of the information is different, and this provides more cues for retrieval. With theories to explain why spaced repetition works. There's also one to kind of explain why massed repetition does not work, and it is simply states that the information becomes redundant when you're learning it over and over and over in one sitting. The improved memory facilitates complex learning and problem solving which leads to a higher order of learning and reasoning. Testing combined with spacing leads to spaced retrieval practice. So testing, when we talk about testing, we're referring to retrieval of information. Not necessarily a physical test, but testing being forcing yourself to retrieve that information. Testing versus rereading. With testing, there is an improved recall for the information to be tested on, and there's also a delayed forgetting, which essentially means that you're retaining the information longer. They also discussed the various types of testing, with quizzes and immediate feedback being one form of testing, and the use of flashcards being another. As with rereading versus testing, spaced retrieval leads to better retention than spaced rereading. Spacing lag represents the time between repetitions for spaced repetition. Now, the lag times do vary depending on the targeted retention interval. So the targeted retention interval is the actual time frame you have to study or to learn a concept or idea. So if you have a shorter target time, then the lag will be shorter, meaning you have to study more frequently. And if the target is a larger target or a farther target, being like a month or two, then the lag can be stretched out longer than a day or two. There are also two concepts, one of equal spaced repetition and expanding scheduled repetition. Basically, expanding scheduled repetition stretches out the repetition, and it's not equally spaced. Using spaced repetition, we also see an improvement in the generalization and transfer of learning. As we stated earlier, one of the big benefits of spaced repetition is that of rote learning, and it provides a very simple recall, but it does focus on the past. And what we want to look for now is a more meaningful learning and being able to use that information, generalizing it to learn to new situations, and applying learning to solve new problems. So essentially, by improving memory of basic knowledge and essential facts and concepts, a higher order of learning and reasoning can be achieved, and that is what meaningful learning essentially is. Interleaving is a concept that is we're now moving into spaced practice rather than spaced repetition. And it is essentially the interspersing of items between spaced repetition. As you can see in the example, B and C are interspersed between the A's, whereas the opposite being the triple A, triple B, and triple C. Interleaving was introduced into a classroom. 7th grade math class was given 9 assignments with each having 12 questions. And the mass repetition group got all 12 questions on a current topic, while the interleaving concept group was only given 4 questions on a current topic, with the other 8 questions being on past topics. Now, all 12 questions were given to both groups, but the 8 remaining questions in the interleaving group were dispersed over the remaining assignments. In the end, the interleaving concept group did much better at recalling the information on the current topic of those 12 questions. The significance of the study is that it was done in a classroom, and there was really no change in any topics covered, lecture content, or assessment. And the bigger significance to all this is that it really suggested that there really isn't a need for a huge radical change in in teaching or curriculum. You just need to tweak some of the homework a little bit. Some of the hurdles that are going to, that spaced repetition is going to face, is that it does require planning and discipline to follow through. And we have to get past this sense of large gains with mass practices, as we saw with the Athenian Oath group. Educators tend to fall back on familiar methods, and the teaching materials and aids are essentially organized for mass practice. Basically, present a topic, homework on the topic, and then the topic never gets revisited until a review 2 or 3 weeks later. In closing, William James in 1899, this is how long this concept has been around, simply said, you now see why cramming must be so poor a mode of study. Cramming seeks to stamp things in by intense application immediately before the ordeal. But a thing thus learned can, from but few occasions, on the other hand, the same thing recurring on different days in different contexts, read, recited on, referred to, again and again, related to other things and reviewed, gets well wrought into the mental structure. This is the reason why you should enforce your pupils' habits of continuous application, essentially spaced repetition. And there is the reference. Thank you.